Welcome to this lecture on evolutionary biology. Today, we are going to explore one of the most powerful and elegant concepts in all of science, natural selection. This is the fundamental engine that drives evolution and shapes every living thing on our planet. By the end of this video, you will not only understand how nature chooses who survives, but you will also be able to calculate it mathematically. Let us dive in. To begin, let us build our intuition with a classic scenario. Imagine you are a hungry bird flying over a dark, soot-covered forest. Down below, there are bright white moths and dark black moths resting on the trees. As a bird, you will easily spot and eat the white moths, while the black ones remain perfectly hidden. Because the black moths survive longer, they are the ones left to have babies, which inherit that excellent dark camouflage. This simple, everyday logic of who survives long enough to reproduce is the exact foundation of how all life adapts to its environment. Now that we understand the basic idea through the moths, let us look at how biologists formally define this process. In evolutionary biology, natural selection is defined as the differential survival and reproduction of individuals due to differences in their physical traits, which we call phenotypes. It is not a random process. Instead, it is a highly specific filtering mechanism. The environment itself acts as a sieve, determining which traits are beneficial and which are harmful. Nature automatically selects the individuals with the most advantageous traits, allowing them to live longer and leave behind more offspring. This formal definition leads us to an important question. What exactly does it take for this process to happen? For natural selection to occur, three crucial conditions must be met within a population. First, there must be variation. Individuals need to have different traits, like various fur colors or beak sizes. Second, these traits must be heritable, meaning they are coded in DNA and passed from parents to offspring. Finally, there must be a struggle for existence. The environment cannot support every individual born, which creates intense competition for limited resources. When all three align, evolution happens. Before we move on to the mathematics, let us understand why this concept is so absolutely critical. Natural selection is the primary mechanism that explains the incredible diversity of life on our planet. Without it, we would have no scientific way to explain why polar bears evolved thick white fur for the freezing Arctic, or why cacti can store water in the scorching desert. Furthermore, this is not just ancient history. In modern medicine, doctors use this concept every single day to study how dangerous bacteria evolve resistance to our antibiotics. It is the ultimate rulebook for survival. Now that we have explored the biological concepts, let us translate this into a precise quantitative science. To measure exactly how strongly nature is selecting for or against a specific trait, biologists use a very simple but powerful equation. W equals 1 minus S. Here, the symbol W represents the relative fitness of an organism. It measures reproductive success with a maximum possible value of 1. The symbol S represents the selection coefficient, which is the penalty imposed by nature for having a less advantageous trait. If the environment becomes harsher, the selection coefficient S increases, which mathematically forces the overall fitness W to decrease. Let us see this formula in action with a concrete example. Imagine a population of beetles in a lush, green environment. The camouflaged green beetles are the most successful, producing an average of 100 surviving offspring. The brown beetles stand out. get eaten more often, and produce only 75 surviving offspring. We want to find the relative fitness of the brown beetles. We do this by taking their offspring count, 75, and dividing it by the offspring count of the most successful group, which is 100. This simple division gives us our final answer, a relative fitness of 0.75. Now that we have calculated the relative fitness, let us determine the exact evolutionary penalty these brown beetles face. We start with our fundamental equation, where fitness equals 1 minus the selection coefficient. Using basic algebra, we rearrange the terms to isolate the selection coefficient, giving us S equals 1 minus W. We then plug in the relative fitness value of 0.75 that we just found. Subtracting this from the maximum possible fitness of 1 reveals a selection coefficient of 0.25. Physically, this means the brown beetles suffer a 25% reproductive disadvantage. Let us apply this to a critical real-world scenario. Bacteria exposed to an antibiotic. The resistant bacteria thrive perfectly, but the normal non-resistant bacteria struggle to survive, facing a selection coefficient of 0.4. We need to find their relative fitness. We substitute the given selection coefficient into our standard equation in place of the selection variable. By subtracting this penalty of 0.4 from the maximum possible fitness of 1, we find that the relative fitness of the non-resistant bacteria is 0.6. This means they are only 60% as successful at reproducing. With the relative fitness calculated, we can now predict the actual surviving population size. We are given an initial population of 1,000 non-resistant bacteria that are trying to reproduce. To find out how many successfully leave offspring, we multiply this starting number by their relative fitness value of 0.6. This multiplication scales down the population to reflect only those individuals that successfully overcome the antibiotic pressure. The result shows that out of the initial 1,000 bacteria, only 600 will successfully manage to survive and reproduce in the next generation. Finally, let us calculate the exact death toll caused by this natural selection. To find the total loss, we must compare our successful survivors to the original potential population. We take the initial 1,000 potential reproducers and subtract the 600 successful survivors we just calculated. This final subtraction isolates the exact number of individuals that failed to pass on their genes. The answer is 400. This clearly demonstrates how a selection coefficient translates into a massive real-world population decline, rapidly driving the evolution of the population toward total antibiotic resistance. To visualize everything we have just calculated, let us look at this graph of directional natural selection. On the horizontal axis, we have the physical trait, such as fur or shell color, ranging from light to dark. The vertical axis shows the number of individuals. The dashed bell curve represents our original population, which is mostly light-colored. However, because the environment is harsh for light-colored individuals, there is a strong selection pressure pushing against them, represented by the large black arrow. Over time, the entire population shifts, resulting in the solid blue curve, where the dark phenotype becomes the new normal. We have covered a lot of ground today, so let us summarize our key takeaways. First, remember that natural selection is the logical outcome of variation, inheritance, and competition in a world with limited resources. Second, it is absolutely not a random process. It is a highly specific filtering mechanism where the environment determines which traits are beneficial. Finally, by using mathematical tools like fitness and the selection coefficient, we can precisely measure and predict how populations will change over time. You now have a solid understanding of the beautiful, continuous engine that shapes all living organisms.